In 2015, the future was a murky concept for Hideo Kojima. He had just left Konami in a very public, mysterious and unceremonious manner in the wake of Metal Gear Solid 5's troubled release and Silent Hill's abrupt cancellation. It was a bitter breakup from the company that had been his creative and professional home for over 30 years, the company that had provided Kojima with the foundation to build his now legendary auteur status, a rare distinction in an industry that doesn't make a point to showcase any one individual over the company name. However, it was during Metal Gear Solid 5's development that the tide seemed to turn sour on Konami's golden child. Multiple reports that surfaced from behind the scenes of Konami during the game's development painted the picture of a hostile work environment, with Kojima and Konami rumoured to be at loggerheads. On March 16th, 2015, those rumours gained even more traction when Konami announced that it will be restructuring its game development operations to shift our production structure to a headquarters control system in order to establish a steadfast operation base capable of responding to the rapid market changes that surround our digital entertainment business. In short, Konami were going all in with mobile games, leaving big budget productions behind. In the wake of this news, Kojima and his studios were removed from promotional material and websites relating to the Metal Gear Solid series, which, given the tradition of Kojima's name being adorned on the cover of each of his games, was a damning statement of the turmoil engulfing the studio. To further compound the chaos, Kojima's studio was also given a rebrand, now going by the name Konami Los Angeles Studio, and a separate Metal Gear Solid Twitter account making no reference to Kojima was established. The writing was not on the wall, the walls were being torn down. More and more reports continued to flood into the news over the following days, and on March 19th, an anonymous employee reported to GameSpot, seemingly confirming that the changes were a direct result of the conflict between Kojima and Konami. The employee also explained how the staff of Kojima Productions were now being treated as contracted workers rather than employees, and that all of the studio's senior staff, Kojima included, were planning to leave Konami at the end of their contracts in December 2015, following the release of The Phantom Pain. Roughly a month later, on April 26, 2015, fans' worst fears were realised as Silent Hill's assistant director, Guillermo del Toro, confirmed that the game had been cancelled. Norman Reedus followed up the next day with a statement on Twitter detailing the very same depressing news. The final indignation came in December 2015 at the Game Awards, an event in which Kojima Productions were nominated for Developer of the Year. According to reports, Kojima was banned from attending by Konami's lawyers, leaving Keither Sunderland to awkwardly collect awards on his behalf. The move generated audible disdain from the crowd at the Game Awards, all of whom seemed very much on Kojima's side.
As you noticed, Hideo Kojima is not here with us tonight, and I want to tell you a little bit about that. Mr. Kojima had every intention of being with us tonight, but unfortunately he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami just recently that he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards. He's still under an employment contract, and it's disappointing, and it's inconceivable to me that an artist like Hideo would not be allowed to come here and celebrate with his peers and his fellow teammates such an incredible game as Metal Gear Solid 5. But that's the situation we're in. Hideo is in Tokyo right now watching the show, so we want you to know, Hideo, that we're thinking of you. And we miss you. We hope to see you at the Game Awards 2016.
It was unfathomable that the once bountiful relationship between Kojima and Konami would end in the way it did, and it was an even stranger sequence of events for arguably the world's most famous game developer to find himself in. Kojima, at 52 years of age, was suddenly out on his own. His departure from Konami all but marked the spiritual death of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. However, the Metal Gear name would later prove to be far too valuable for Konami to lay to rest, even in the absence of its visionary soul. What Kojima's next step would be was anyone's guess. He was a man left stranded, a famed auteur suddenly without the means to do what he loves most. A man, in his own words, that had nothing around me but a dream and a passion to create. However, Kojima didn't have to wait too long before taking that first step.
皆さんこんにちは。ソニーコンピューターエンターテインメントのアンドルーハウスです。今日は皆さんと一緒に共有したいニュースがあります。 私から直接皆さんと話したいと思い、このようなビデオで発表させていただきます。プレイステーションの歴史を一緒に作ってきた素晴らしいフランチャイズの、生みの親であり、なおかつゲームの歴史の中でも最も才能があるクリエイターの一人の方が今日ここ私と一緒にいます。ご紹介します。小島秀夫監督です。
はい、皆さんこんにちは、小島です。本日付で、独立スタジオを立ち上げました。その最初のプロジェクトを、プレイステーションと始めたいと思っています。
On December 16th, 2015, in a joint announcement with Sony, Kojima announced that he was re-establishing Kojima Productions as an independent studio alongside Yoshi Shinkara and Kenshiro Imasuri. Sorry for the pronunciation on those ones. More remarkably, Kojima also announced that he would be developing a brand new franchise exclusively for PlayStation 4 in what would be his first non-Metal Gear game since 2003's Boktai. Shortly thereafter, Guerrilla Games presented Kojima with their much-lauded Decima engine for use in developing his new game.
They were looking for something for the perfect fit, and one of the things that's really important to them is like making sure they get the best out of the platform to give the best experience for the people playing the game. They're really adamant. They want to make sure that they will do anything to make sure that the game is the best thing they can do on the platform that they're releasing it on. So they were really impressed by the performance figures, by also the tool set around it. And we've been working with them ever since.
Kojima and his team immediately got to work, and to everyone's amazement and excited confusion, Death Stranding made its bow at E3 2016. It seems only appropriate that a game like Death Stranding would emerge from the ashes of Kojima's fallout with Konami, a tale of a man wandering an isolated foreign landscape looking to reconnect the dots and people of a once unified nation. Kojima himself was an isolated figure trying to find his way in an industry that had just disposed of him, but it was an industry that over his long distinguished career had left strands of connection that Kojima would use to his fullest advantage. Death Stranding seems like a natural progression for a man like Kojima, a tale that interweaves his love of overblown cinematic narratives and one that perhaps taps into his own personal experiences. In an interview with BBC, Kojima says that, "I'm very prone to loneliness. I think there are similar people around the world, especially gamers. When they're alone playing video games in their living room, they don't feel like they fit into society or their community. So when people play this game, they realize people like them exist all over the world. Knowing that even though I'm lonely, there are other people like me, and that makes you feel at ease. That's what I want people to feel when they play this game." The discussions regarding Death Stranding in the lead up to its release were a little less gentle. Proclamations that Death Stranding will be an overhyped pile of shite quickly gathered speed directly towards Kojima. Normally people's vitriol is directed towards a company or a particular studio, and not one individual. On the flip side of that argument, individuals within a studio don't normally receive any of the glowing positivity or affection for their games. That love is generally reserved for the banner of the company they work under. Kojima may be in a unique position in the gaming industry thanks to his auteur status, but with that fame comes a lot of negative side effects. His name being so front and center somehow automatically creates separate camps of people, one who believe anything he makes will be overhyped nonsense, and another who believes he's creating the greatest game of all time. Now, I know this to not be true generally speaking, but condensing down a whole man's career to such a simplistic nugget is ridiculous. Throwing insults like "you just don't get it, dumbass" or "he's overhyped" doesn't build bridges to understanding each camp's viewpoint, and if anything, it's just exhausting seeing people insult each other over games that they should or shouldn't like. The reviews following the game's release were extra fuel to the fire, with a few very large publications and various YouTubers claiming that they stopped playing the game around the 10-hour mark, or simply couldn't bring themselves to finish the game. I've never seen such a high-profile game receive such anomalous reactions of pure disdain mixed with glowing recommendations. Edge magazine even infamously proclaimed that there would be no Death Stranding review at all, as their reviewer had simply lost the will to play at around the 40-hour mark. Maybe I'm going off the deep end with this analogy, but stay with me. I'm going to say playing Death Stranding or partaking in any form of media or activity is much like climbing a mountain. You might decide halfway up that going up any further isn't worth it. You might be tired and fed up. You might be happy enough with the view and think that going any higher is simply pointless. So you turn back, content enough with your own experience. However, other people push on and make it to the top, and for me, only the ones who make it to the top can say if the endeavour was truly worth it to them, as they've experienced and witnessed everything the climb had to offer. You see, I completely believe that not wanting to play a game because you don't enjoy it is in itself a valid opinion. I mean, why should you torture yourself for what is ultimately going to be a personally pointless experience? However, I would argue the point that while you yourself didn't want to complete the experience, you open yourself up to people merely commenting on the fact that you didn't complete the game, ignoring any well-expressed criticisms that you had with the game. And if you're a professional game reviewer, you're only making your job harder. Anyway, as a massive fan of Kojima's previous work, and as someone who has played well over 100 hours of Death Stranding, I feel like there is no one objective truth to be found when discussing the game. All I have is my own subjective truth based on my own experience with the game, and that's what I'm going to ramble to you about, you random wonderful person watching this video. How Death Stranding would actually play remained the single greatest mystery in the lead up to the game's release. Based on the majority of trailers, we knew that we'd be in for an ambitious and idiosyncratic narrative packed with famous actors and notable cameos, but bar a handful of gameplay glimpses and tidbits, Kojima didn't really provide us much information on what we'll actually be doing while playing the game. Plus, given Kojima's history of misleading trailers, many, myself included, didn't exactly take the footage at face value. So, jumping into the world of Death Stranding, I didn't really know what to expect. Even though I did my absolute best to avoid reviews prior to picking the game up, I had seen a lot of people label the game as boring or repetitive beforehand, so I would be lying if I didn't say I had a few reservations loading up the game. After all, no matter how hard you try to keep an open mind, the noise of others always finds a way creeping in and distorting the blank slate that is your opinion. So yeah, you are taking on and making deliveries across America for 98% of your time in Death Stranding, and the game doesn't make any attempt to disguise that fact. It's an almost nightmarish description of a video game, a ponderous slog that seems like the antithesis of an enjoyable experience. But 100 hours of playtime later, I can safely say that for me personally, those reservations were quickly snuffed out and replaced with a sense of wonder at the sheer bravery of a development team putting so much love, time and talent into a game like Death Stranding. For better or worse, this is genuinely unlike anything I've ever played. Kojima and his team managed to take arguably the most universally despised video game cliché, the fetch quest, and build an entire game around it, and somehow mutate it into something evocative, engaging, and strangely entertaining. I just got lost in the simple act of navigating and exploring this stunning vacant landscape with the weight of the world on my back. Artist Yoji Shinkawa, Kojima's long-term collaborator, deserves so much credit for bringing the world of Death Stranding to life. I also feel like because the mechanics behind moving through this world required concentration and alertness, I learned this map in a way I haven't learned an open world map in a long time. Side note, special mention has to go to the game's soundtrack, which for me personally is one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in the game. From the quiet stirs of low roar to the ambient whispers of the environment, each and every piece of music enhances the entire experience and plays its part in creating one of the most pensive video game worlds I've ever stepped foot in. Anyway, getting from point A to point B is your goal. Initially you have nothing but your back and your legs to carry what needs to be delivered, as well as carrying all of your required equipment. You go to a terminal at one of the many stations and accept an order that you will be graded on one of the following 4 conditions: time, quantity, condition, and miscellaneous. Time-focused deliveries are graded on how quickly you can get the delivery done. Quantity is based on how much you can stack onto your spine and deliver in one piece. Condition is focused on delicate packages that must be delivered with care, and miscellaneous deliveries normally center on lost or stolen cargo that must be hunted or tracked down and delivered back to its rightful owner. Some special missions include conditions such as having to hold a container by hand at all times and making sure to keep a nice pizza flat. You can utilize ladders, climbing ropes, various exoskeletons, and even piss and shit grenades. All of the available equipment will be needed to give you the best possible option when confronted with an impasse. The amount of tools at your disposal is rather impressive, and the weight limit to what Sam can carry only adds to the balancing act of having Sam carry more tools or deciding to carry more for deliveries. Sam has a stamina bar that you must be wary of at all times, because if it depletes, that precious cargo and Sam himself will likely fall flat on their collective arses. Climbing up a steep slope is particularly dangerous if you're not paying attention to Sam's stamina, as much like real life, no amount of monster energy is going to enable you to run like a madman up a massive incline for prolonged periods. Seeing as the landscape is hazardous to traverse, you spend a lot of your time with both shoulder buttons pressed down to further help Sam keep his balance, something that was not as irritating as I thought it would be. The controls just felt natural. The world map of Death Stranding gives you the option to meticulously plot your route prior to you setting off, allowing you to have the option to trek the path of least resistance, geographically speaking anyway. The core gameplay loop is a wonderful mix of planning, precaution and patience. There is a lot of forethought required in how to approach each of the many different landscapes, and I found myself continually engaged with what I was doing. Selecting my equipment, optimizing it and setting out into the world became my go-to activity for many an evening. But it has to be said that the first two chapters are undoubtedly a trial by fire, as you're severely under-equipped to handle enemies and traverse long distances. All you have at your disposal combat-wise is a strand that can be used to choke enemies one at a time after a well-timed counter, and your fists. It's easy to see how the early game's design can lead to frustration. It's a slow affair that gives the impression that this is all the game will be, a monotonous slog across a desolate landscape. However, once Chapter 3 rolls around, Death Stranding starts to show its hand, and by God, it's fantastic. As you increase your connection level with the people in the world, more and more items and weapons become available. You gain access to bikes and trucks, making journeys faster, and the storage space the trucks provide make large hauls far more efficient. If trucks aren't your style, you can use up to 2 floating carriers that serve as handy attachable wheelbarrows. Speed, power and all-terrain exoskeletons also give you extra options on how you want to approach each delivery. You even gain access to robotic couriers who can make deliveries on your behalf, helping you increase the star rating at different bases as you deliver elsewhere. Combat-wise, you can engage in combat with human enemies called mules, who are people driven mad by their desire to steal deliveries. Yeah, it's a bit mad. These can be stealthy affairs a la Metal Gear, or a full-on assault a la Metal Gear. Mules can hone in on your location, so more often than not, you're on the defensive as they make their way to you. If you're defeated by them, they'll steal your cargo, which you'll need to retrieve from a mule base. The mule fights are a fun distraction from the deliveries, but as soon as you get your first bola gun, they become a formality, rather than a real threat. The BT encounters, however, are an ever-constant threat throughout your travels, and are supremely atmospheric and tense. The first time you get caught and dragged through the ground by a group of touchy-feely BTs is easily one of the most what the fuck moments I've had in gaming. BB, or the Bridge Baby, are your tools for navigating the BT encounters. BB allows you to see the BTs or detect how close they are to you. The BTs are absolutely best avoided in the early game, as you don't have the means to do much damage to them. But later on you're provided with an array of weaponry such as assault rifles, handguns and even rocket and grenade launchers loaded with blood bullets, as well as a handy pair of scissors to sneakily cut their umbilical cords and by virtue their connection to the land of the living. While these BT encounters never lose their visual power, over the course of the game's runtime they definitely become more of an annoyance. I found myself groaning as I drove on my newly built highways, dreading the impending non-skippable scene of BB alerting me to BT's presence. Luckily, this issue was fixed in a very recent patch, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't become tiresome during my playthrough of the game. Moreover, the larger BT encounters that occur when you're caught by the touchy-feelies are bizarrely easy and require nothing more than running outside a circular zone of tar. Sure, you can stand your ground and fight them, but it never really seemed worth my time. The other primary feature in Death Stranding is the asymmetric support between all of its players, a wonderful, refreshing feature that truly made Death Stranding a collaborative, gratifying experience. This feature comes into play in areas that have been hooked up to the chiral network, meaning you have to navigate each area by yourself before getting access to other player structures and items in that area. It's a wonderful blend of gameplay complementing narrative. In an interview with Famitsu, Kojima explained how he wanted to create empathy using indirect communication. In games, we default to doing things that benefit us. If I do this, I'll power up. If I do that, I'll make money. Even building bridges is motivated by personal gain. I want to get across the gap, so I'll build a bridge. But the bridges you build in Death Stranding are shared with other players in the world, and they'll give your bridge a like when they use it. Once that happens, you start thinking things like, maybe that was a good spot for a bridge, and then you build your next bridge in a spot that helps others as well as yourself. Maybe instead of throwing away items you don't need, you put them in a shared locker. My hope is that it creates a chain reaction of positivity, though I will say the staff hated the idea of including just likes in the game. They kept saying, who would bother giving something a like if it doesn't do anything for them? Likes are just free love, they can't be traded for money or weapons. Rebuilding the road network of America is a mammoth yet mutually beneficial endeavour for every single player in Death Stranding. It was something I personally spent a lot of time doing. Investing piece by piece and seeing the fruits of everyone's labour was a joy to behold. Chipping in to upgrade timefall shelters, post boxes, generators, or even leaving equipment or trucks behind for others to use was equally satisfying. You navigate this world alone, sure, but you're constantly dipping in and out of other players' strands and stumbling onto paths that someone, somewhere in the world has trekked. Honestly, I find it so refreshing to consciously leave a motorbike somewhere that might help someone else down the line. The system created such a wonderful positive community, and seeing as the likes you receive from others are essentially worthless, it seems like quite a pure endeavour. In the very same interview with Famitsu, Kojima also stated that the internet can directly connect players, certainly, but some people use the anonymity that affords to do and say hurtful things to people without a second thought. Even in games we get online to pick up guns and shoot at each other. Technology can connect the entire world in real time, and that's all we can think to do with it. I think a lot of people could be pretty sick of the internet. I personally really connected with this theme. The world is in an odd state right now, and to escape into a world in which people are making such a conscious effort to help others is, as cheesy as it is to say, genuinely heartwarming. Everyone is in this together, and I was often hit with a real sense of gratitude towards players who left a vehicle or an item to help get me out of a tight situation. But that brings me around to the boss fights, which for me are the absolute weakest aspect of the game. Don't get me wrong, visually speaking, they're absolutely spectacular, particularly the ghostly battlefields of World War I, II and Vietnam that you find yourself in during the Cliff Unger boss fight trilogy. But this is a Kojima game, the very same Kojima responsible for the most famously unique and creative boss fights of all time. Boss fights that were layered, multifaceted encounters that routinely gave you multiple ways to win. For example, the boss fight against the end in Metal Gear Solid 3. When you find yourself in the sights of the legendary 100-year-old sniper, you are tasked with going toe-to-toe with him in an epic sniper battle across 3 large jungle areas. Well, that's what the game seems to be nudging you to do. But what was so brilliant about Snake Eater was that the mechanics gave you so many options to completely ignore that narrative-driven nudge. And yes, you could take to the long grass and indulge in a monumental sniper battle lasting hours as you play cat versus cat, or you can get crafty and observe him by following the glare off his sniper rifle, and then sneak up on him and rob him blind. Or perhaps you could equip your thermal goggles to track his footprints so he never gets the jump on you, or you simply keep an eye out for his distinctive pet parrot to get a lock on his location. You could also whip out your directional mic and track the noise of his heavy 100-year-old breathing and toss a grenade his way, or just say fuck it and pretend to be a crocodile. It's a boss fight with so many moving parts that it honestly feels like your options are unlimited. So many of the items and mechanics you've garnered over the course of the game can be utilised in a variety of ways. Hell, even mechanics outside the game can be exploited to your benefit. If you decide to wait 2 weeks, or if you change the date on your console, you'll load up the game to find that the end has died of old age, waiting on your ass to play the game again. Perhaps even more brilliantly, you can skip the fight altogether if you manage to be quick enough with your sniper rifle after an earlier cutscene, where you can take the end out while he's still soundly sleeping in his wheelchair. Look, you get the idea. While I've cherry-picked the end as an example, it's sheer madness how many tactics there were in regards to tackling each and every boss fight in the Metal Gear Solid series. It's the sort of mechanical and fourth wall ridiculousness that I've come to love in a Kojima game, but unfortunately in Death Stranding, the boss battles are mechanically flat experiences. You defeat each boss in the exact same way, and in the case of Unger, you defeat him using the exact same tactic on 3 separate occasions. You defeat him by following him around the map and shooting him with an array of assault rifles and shotguns that are placed around each war beach. And that's it. There is literally no other way to beat Unger. You are restricted to one method of progression, as Sam is stripped of all of his gear and weapons at the beginning of each fight. There is a distinct lack of obscure or creative options in regards to the boss fights, and honestly I find that genuinely disappointing. The core gameplay mechanics that are employed for the majority of the game just break down in the framework of a boss fight. The game was built around the concept of delivering packages across a fast, pensive landscape, and it does that remarkably well, but the boss fights seem tacked on and completely reliant on the game's most basic mechanics. Without your gear and with such simplistic combat controls, the boss fights are shallow affairs. But worst of all, they're lacking the wonderful charm and the layers that made many bosses in the Metal Gear Solid series so damn good. The only boss fight that made me jump up and take notice was the Higgs boss fight, which is pretty much the main boss fight in the entire game. Higgs spends a lot of the time winking at the audience beforehand, as he literally tells Sam this is going to be a boss battle, which isn't really a subtle wink but more of a blatant scream. When the battle begins, Sam proceeds to weaken Higgs by throwing old PlayStations and other cases at him, which honestly feels pretty underwhelming initially. I feared that, like every other boss fight in the game, this'll be all there is to my showdown with the game's lead antagonist, but as the fight reaches its climax, it descends into the avant-garde bizarre madness that had been missing from every other boss fight. Health bars and crunching slow-motion punches randomly enter the fray, and I couldn't help but smile at the sheer cheesiness of it. For a brief moment, it felt like a classic Kojima boss fight. However, in my mind, making multiple fourth wall breaking references mocking the concept of generic boss battles doesn't elevate your own generic boss battles to greater heights, and one glorious Tekken-esque fistfight doesn't excuse it either. Ultimately, the best thing I can say about the gameplay is that it shines light on the elements of playing a game that I feel like I've been conditioned to ignore. The environment and landscape is not only there for a visual feast, it's the beast that you must be constantly conscious of in order to overcome. I can absolutely see how the game loop might not be for everyone, and it was something I wasn't even sure would be for me, but I was enamored. Kojima's games are routinely lamented by many for their weak storytelling, poor dialogue, or flamboyant, nonsensical plots. It's a criticism that has followed Kojima for a lot of his career. I can only speak for myself here, but in spite of the convoluted plots, Kojima's games always evoke emotion. I always care about the characters, even if I'm not always certain why. If I would summarize his writing, I would say that Kojima creates fascinating characters and deeply interesting worlds and lore, but sometimes struggles to tie them together in a cohesive manner. If anything, it's when his games try to explain what's going on that they suffer most. However, it would be ignorant of me to ignore the fact that I've never been privy to Kojima's words as he himself expressed them. My lack of Japanese is a barrier in that regard. I've only ever been able to judge him by someone else's translation of his work, and so much can be lost in translation, particularly in the subtlety or poetry of dialogue. Overall, there's just such an earnest quality to his games that have such an indelible soul and personality to them, that while sometimes frustrating, they are never forgettable. This is the line that Kojima once again dances along with Death Stranding, and he dances on it with reckless, beautiful abandon. Firstly, the most startling thing about Death Stranding's narrative is that it's relatively light on cutscenes by Kojima's lofty standards, well up until the final third of the game. There's definitely more to feast your eyes on than Metal Gear Solid 5's slim offerings, but this is definitely not anywhere near Metal Gear Solid 4's level of cutscene indulgence. If anything, it lies between the two in terms of how it presents its story. All of the important stuff is told via gorgeously crafted cutscenes to showcase some of the single most impressive visuals I've ever seen in a game, and a lot of the background information and smaller character beats are given to you in the form of emails and unlockable interviews, akin to the cassette tapes of Metal Gear Solid 5, albeit without voice acting. Lastly, to finish off the narrative pie are BB's flashbacks of Max Mikkelsen talking, singing, ranting, and even wishing you a happy birthday. The game is sliced into 14 chapters, with each chapter focusing on one of the many primary and supporting characters, so I'm going to do my best to give a succinct overview of each chapter and my thoughts on them. And while there are fascinating little side missions of sorts for many of the small characters from each settlement, for the sake of brevity I will only be covering the main narrative of the game. There is enough for me to try and cover, so the tales of lost love, marriage, Conan O'Brien, and the somber tale of the Elder will have to be left aside. So with that in mind, grab a drink, get cozy, and let me go over the whole damn story, chapter by chapter. We can do this. So, to get the ball rolling, what is the mysterious Death Stranding that led to the events of the game in the first place? Time for my very own exposition dump. Well, the premise is not exactly as convoluted as the game's initial trailers had you believe. It's still mental, don't get me wrong, but the basics aren't too crazy to follow. The Death Stranding occurred when beach things, or BTs, suddenly find their way into the land of the living, triggering numerous and catastrophic explosions known as voidites. These voidites essentially wiped out most of the life on the planet, leaving gargantuan craters and untold destruction behind them. In the aftermath of the Death Stranding, rain mutated into timefall, which causes anyone or anything it touches to age at an incredible rate. BTs now wander the world, being pulled towards living things unlucky enough to be detected. On account of the world now being a clusterfuck of danger and death, the last remnants of humanity have gone underground Fallout style in various shelters and isolated cities called knots, with a few preppers slogging it out there alone. This means that humanity has a profound need for porters, people willing to brave the hard BT-infested landscape to deliver essentials from one place to another. Porters are the heroes of the world of Death Stranding. They figuratively and almost literally carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's a truly captivating premise that arrested my attention from the get-go. We're then introduced to Sam Porter Bridges, played by Norman Reedus. Sam is a former Bridges porter who has gone independent. Little information is given about Sam other than the fact he carries a picture of his family. He also doesn't like being physically touched, which, considering the world he finds himself in, is pretty understandable. A mysterious woman comes to Sam's aid in a wonderfully tense cave scene. After escaping, Sam makes a delivery to Central Knot City before being tasked with escorting a corpse to an incinerator before it necrotizes and causes another huge voidoid. In true video game style, everything goes tits up and BTs attack the truck, leaving yet another crater of destruction behind. Sam doesn't die in the carnage, however, as he is a repatriate, which essentially allows him to return from the dead. Sam also manages to save a defunct BB, or bridge baby, that one of the victims was carrying. Sam comes to and finds himself in Capital Knot City under the supervision of a man called Deadman. Deadman tells Sam that the president of this broken America is on the verge of death and needs morphine delivered. The president is described as being like a mother to Sam.
What president? America's gone. You talking about the mayor of Central Knot?
No, not the mayor. America lives on, Sam. A president is in the final stages of cancer, in critical condition, but there's still time.
Why me?
Look, Sam. Do as I ask, and I promise it will all make sense.
Why don't you do it?
Sam makes his way to Bridget Strand, who makes a pretty damn cheeky request to essentially rebuild the entire country on her behalf.
That's the president's right-hand man, the director of bridges.
Die Hardman?
Oh, you were with Bridges 1? So, I guess no introductions are necessary.
What's it been, Sam? 10 years? Look at us. A bunch of deathless freaks meeting like this. Yeah, well, good to see you two. President's waiting.
Amelie.
Amelie?
You remember Amelie went west. Took her 3 years to cross. She's trying to rebuild the country.
Still going on about that, huh?
You're the one I wanted to send, Sam. Time's running out.
Bridget then dies in dramatic fashion. Sam, who you get the impression isn't too fond of the idea of walking across the whole country, reluctantly agrees and attaches his new pair of cufflinks. In a somber scene, Sam is tasked with carrying his mother's corpse to a nearby incinerator in order to avoid yet another cataclysmic voidoid. Sam is given the bridge baby he rescued to aid him in his mission. Side exposition dump. A bridge baby is a baby that has been taken from a still mother's womb. On account of this, the BBs have a strong connection to the world of the dead. Bridge operatives who then establish a trans connection with the BB can then develop the ability to sense and see BTs. Okay. Anyway, Sam makes it to the incinerator and disposes of his mother's corpse, but he can't bring himself to dispose of BB. Sam decides to keep BB against orders. One BT attack later and Sam is back in capital Knot City.
Give my regards to the president.
I found the opening stellar and very effective in setting up the tone of the world. The cave scene was simply great and it made the BTs seem like the most terrifying creatures imaginable. Okay, on to the rest of the game. Episode 2, Amelie. The mammoth task of reconnecting America is then explained by Amelie Strand, Bridget's daughter, played by Emily O'Brien. Amelie has been captured in Edge Knot City on the opposite end of the country. A masked man named Deadman is present at the meeting.
Samantha America Strand, our new president. A new beginning for our people, for our nation.
Amelie requests that Sam makes his way to free her while connecting every city to the chiral network along the way. Sam is given a device called a Q-pit to fulfill the country's broadband needs.
My name is Sam Porter Bridges.
It's a funny word, strand. A strand is part of rope or bond, while stranding means being washed up on the shore. And being stranded is when you can't go home. I'm stranded now, Sam. Here on the shore of the Pacific. Thousands of miles away, but our bond still holds.
Brought you an astronaut. Mankind can go anywhere, even outer space. You'll be out of there in no time. And the second all this is over, I'm going to take you wherever you want to go.
Sam eventually makes it to Port Knot City before being attacked by a man named Higgs, played by Troy Baker. Higgs appears to be able to control BTs and summons one of them to take care of Sam. Luckily, Sam is able to throw grenades of his own blood to conquer the BT. Sam then heads for a boat to cross the Great Crater Lake, and once again meets the woman from the cave, who introduces herself as Fragile. Episode 3, Fragile. Fragile, who is played by Seydoux, is the most interesting character to make her way to the screen in the game up until this point. On the boat journey, Fragile and Sam have a little chat. Fragile reveals that her body has been all but destroyed by Timefall, but in slightly happier news, she also has her own little delivery company. Fragile has a divisive reputation that she seems reticent to clarify. Half of the people think she's a hero who saved Lake Knot City, and the other half believe her to be a despicable terrorist who obliterated Middle Knot City. Sam goes about his business before that cheeky bastard Higgs, in the most obvious surprise I've ever seen in a game, tries to trick Sam into delivering a bomb to South Knot City.
I presume? sorry about that. The system seems to be on the fritz. One of the packages wasn't processed properly and got left out of the order. It says here the client is Fragile herself. Someone double-tagged it so the system couldn't tell whether it was for Fragile Express or Bridges. Anywho, really sorry for the holdup, and careful. The contents are fragile. Yes, okay.
Sam handles it courtesy of a giant tar pit, and Fragile opens up in a beautifully crafted yet painful scene, describing how Higgs forced her to walk naked through the timefall rain in order to save the city from a similar bomb. Everything bar her face, which was covered by a mask Higgs kindly provided, was rapidly aged and altered from the incident. Fragile bravely making her way through the timefall rain was a scene that actively made me wince. It's such a hard thing to imagine going through, and it was a strong visual to showcase the kind of character Fragile is. I'm fragile, but I'm not. Episode 4, Unger. Anyway, after the South Knot City nuke incident, Sam hooks the city up to the chiral network, which has been experiencing some technical issues on account of all the increased traffic. Out of nowhere, Supercell appears and drags Sam in. Sam wakes up having been transported to a visually breathtaking beach set in the trenches of World War I. A beach acts as a purgatory between the realm of the living and the dead. A beach is uniquely different for every person, but they can be shared between multiple people through shared trauma, and nothing can be more traumatic than the horrors of war. The man who's been seen during BB's numerous flashbacks appears as a soldier with his very own mystical grunts. His name is Cliff Unger, played predictably brilliantly by Mads Mikkelsen. Unger wants BB back, as it seems like he's the baby's father. After Sam defeats Unger, he is ejected from the supercell and finds himself back in South Knot City. With no time having passed since his disappearance, Die Hartman directs Sam towards Mama, so the Q-pit can be repaired and the chiral disturbance neutralized. Episode 5, Mama. Sam arrives at Mama's lab, only to find out she's the mama of a BT. Mama's baby had tragically died in her womb during the first attempted bombing of South Knot City by Higgs. Her baby failed to cross over to the beach and is tethered to the world by Mama. Sam is obviously alarmed by the BT's baby's presence, but Mama seems unwilling to let her child go. A lot of praise for performances in Death Stranding have been directed towards Mads Mikkelsen, who unquestionably brings a gravitas to the role of Unger, but I find Margaret Qualley's performance as Mama and later Lochna to be my personal favourite performance from any of the actors. She elevated her material, and the scene of her losing her baby is profoundly gut-wrenching, so kudos to her for handling a difficult role with grace, talent and commitment. Moving on, Mama gives Sam a brand spanking new Q-pit and sends him on his way to South Knot City to meet Lochna, the only person capable of fixing the chiral network's issues. After a grueling journey, Sam is greeted with essentially a middle finger from Lochna, who refuses to help due to Mama abandoning her and stealing her baby. A pretty heavy argument to find yourself in the middle of. Mama then requests Sam to carry her lazy arse to Lochna so they can hash things out face to face. Before that, Mama gives Sam a chiral cut and cuff that enables him to sever the connection BTs have with the world. Mama tells Sam she is ready to let her baby go, and in yet another emotionally charged scene, Sam honors her wish and grants her baby passage to the afterlife.
Cord snipping super handcuffs.
Right. Let's try them out. Cut the cord connecting us. She's sound asleep. I made sure she got plenty of milk. Just do it. Please, Sam. Set us free.
Higgs once again shows up talking shite and armed with oversized BT goons. After Sam handles Higgs' nonsense, he reunites Mama with Lochna, and it turns out they're twins. Mama had agreed to carry Lochna's baby as she couldn't have kids of her own, but after the baby's death, Mama isolated herself out of grief. However, the reunion is short-lived as Mama dies minutes into the twins' long overdue conversation. When Mama dies, her spirit transfers into Lochna, making them one and the same person, just as they've always felt they should be. It was a beautiful moment, but I was a little perplexed upon first thought as to why Mama suddenly died. I mean, she seemed grand when we hopped in the hot spring together. She was also very chatty on the journey and didn't give me the impression that death was close. Upon reflection, I gathered that her death was a result of severing the connection between her and her baby, thus freeing them both to pass to where they should be, her child to the afterlife, and Mama to her twin. But yeah, when her death was actually happening, I felt like it came kind of out of left field. Episode 6, Deadman. Deadman appears in Sam's quarters to inform Sam that BB has been losing his functions as a BT tracker and must be recalibrated. Sam is noticeably beginning to refer to BB as Lou, going against the notion that BBs are simply tools. What follows is the most unnecessarily rapey scene I've ever had the dishonour of watching. The image of Del Toro possibly crossing wet-clothed swords with Norman Reedus in a compact shower is now one burnt onto my eyeballs. Deadman warns Sam against trusting Die Hardman, who is now Sam's boss and the acting director of Bridges. For the life of me, I've no idea what was to be gained from setting up this scene in the manner it was. The revelation that Die Hardman might be up to no good is a huge plot point, but it is undermined by the presentation of that information. I'm pretty much game for a lot of Kojima and Company's brand of storytelling oddities, but even if it was played for humour, it was one of the few moments in the game where I just rolled my eyes and felt a split second of embarrassment as my girlfriend entered the room. Anyway, Sam now has to navigate the world without Lou as he makes his way to various preppers. After a while, an eye dry, Deadman asks Sam to meet him near Mountain Knot City as Lou is once again ready for use. However, another supercell appears and drags Sam and Deadman through its vortex of time-travelling afterlife madness. Episode 7, Clifford. Deadman and Sam find themselves in another cinematic gorgeous location that looks like Paris during World War II. Sam once again has to power through a battlefield to find Deadman and Lou. Sam eventually finds them and tells Deadman to stay firmly behind bars, probably as a result of their shower together. Unger is napping in his spiderweb before opening his eyes to Sam and BB's presence. Sam confronts Unger and eventually defeats him, freeing himself, Deadman and BB from the beach. Back at Mountain Knot City, Deadman uses the dog tag Sam took from the beach to give the lowdown on who Unger is and why he might be pursuing Sam. It's also noted that Unger fought in Iraq and is a highly trained soldier, which was pretty evident, but it's always nice to get the clarification. It has to be said that Clifford Unger is just a fantastic character who instantly lights up the game anytime he's on screen, and yes, that's a smoking pun. After everyone's caught their breath, Sam is given the task of carrying Mama's non-decomposing body to a man named Hartman, a researcher who lives in the arse end of the mountains.
If my thinking is correct, the dimension to which you traveled is a kind of beach. To explain a little, our bodies, our ha, all occupy the same world, but our souls, our ka, have beaches all their own. These beaches are given form inside our brains by our beliefs, religion, philosophy, and so forth. As a result, a beach can be anything, and those anythings form a multiverse. However, if many people die at once, their beaches can become entangled, creating a strand field. This phenomenon is exacerbated in wartime by omnipresent feelings of resentment and despair. Beaches are more easily and frequently entangled.
BB is returned to Sam, but BB seems to have forgotten who Sam is on account of his recalibration. Story-wise, the Clifford chapter is the game firing on all of its high-concept cylinders. Episode 8, Hartman. Next up is a journey to Hartman's lab. Hartman is a man with a hell of a connection to death and the beaches, as every 21 minutes he goes into cardiac arrest and then spends 3 minutes on the beach searching for his family. Hartman is a character I absolutely adored. While his likeness is that of famed director Nicholas Winding Refn, he is truly brought to life by Darren Jacobs' superb voice acting and great enunciation. His story is genuinely heartbreaking, even if Kojima insists on beating you over the head with references to hearts. He's a character that shouldn't work as well as he did, one with a name and backstory on paper that is borderline outrageous, but in practice turns out to be incredibly relatable, engaging, and human. Hartman wakes up and shows Sam his killer DVD collection before talking about the origin of the Death Stranding, and that there's evidence that the Earth may have experienced multiple Death Strandings throughout its history. Before Hartman can explain anymore, he once again goes into cardiac arrest, leaving Sam to, well, just sort of sit there. Hartman comes to and instructs Sam to hook up some other researchers to the chiral network so ancient discoveries can be shared amongst the people researching the same thing.
The people who died in the 2 void-outs were there. What happened? What's going on?
Sam does his thing and returns to Hartman, who now believes that there is an extinction entity that has been behind 5 previous Death Strandings. He theorizes that this extinction entity is the strand that connects the world of the living to the beaches. Deadman, with charge out possibly in hand, tells Sam to make his way to the other end of the tar pit via BT Uber and finally complete the chiral network. Episode 9. Higgs. After getting dropped off by his otherworldly Uber, sneaking through monstrous jellyfish BTs, and finally making it to Edge Knot City, Higgs once again shows up acting the prick. Higgs summons the massive BT seen in the prologue, but Sam is the hero, so it does fuck all. Higgs escapes to a beach, so Sam enlists Fragile's help in order to track him down and finish him off. Cue arguably the most gobsmacking scenes in the entire game. Sam and Higgs beat the ever-living shit out of each other before Fragile arrives to get her closure with Higgs' betrayal. Sam leaves Fragile to it, with Higgs being presumably killed. No more pizza tips for Sam. Amelie and Sam... just watch it.
How do we do it? Do we jump like Fragile?
No. The beach goes the whole way. We run. Together.
Run?
Yeah. Like Mario and Princess Peach.
I find it hard to explain to you watching this video just what passed through my head watching that cutscene. If the shower scene was enough to induce eye rolling and embarrassment, this was enough to induce a coma. It was so abrupt and tonally abrasive that I have no idea why anyone let this make its way into the finished game. It's literally the only scene of its kind. This isn't a Yakuza game where the camp action and tonal shifts are an ever-present. And sure, the dialogue in Death Stranding does fluctuate in terms of quality, and the game does play with the fourth wall, but the Princess Beach incident just sticks out like a sore dick. Is Mario a reference they'd be making in this world? Is this what their relationship entailed? And I loved Death Stranding's narrative up until this point. Whatever the game was selling, I was pretty much buying. However, this scene sucked any dramatic tension out of what I assumed was the climax of the game, and the ripple effect of it took quite a while to dissipate. I'm all for working outside the box, but Jesus, this was piss poor in my opinion. All you can do is laugh. Anyway, Die Hartman finds his way to the beach armed with a handgun to thankfully break up whatever the fuck I just witnessed. Die Hartman attempts to kill Bridget, but Unger does his best Daniel Craig impression and grabs Bridget. Amelie pushes Sam into the ocean, thereby returning him to the world of the living. Episode 10, Die Hardman. With the chiral network completed, the game's narrative begins to gain momentum and become more linear as it approaches its end. Sam is asked to return all the way to capital Knot City, but upon making it to Lake Knot City, one last supercell opens up and Sam is once again confronted by Unger. And that's really all there is to episode 10 that I feel is worth mentioning. Episode 11, Clifford Unger. Sam's final showdown with Unger is set against yet another scenic beach-time war zone, this time in Vietnam. The Unger encounters, while mechanically bland as I said earlier in the video, are undoubtedly visual feasts with wonderful art direction. Unger is also a terrifically complex character whose motivations are very difficult to pin down. The way the flashback scenes interweave with the narrative also feed into Unger's mystique. Anyway, after defeating Unger for the third time, you'd really think Unger would have copped on to Sam's tactics by now. Sam and Cliff share a brief conversation. Cliff tells Sam that his name isn't Sam Porter, but Sam Bridges.
Baby, we're getting out of here. I promise. Give me back my baby.
Before the two can have a more informative conversation, a gunshot is heard and Unger disappears. Sam is ejected from the beach and finds himself in Port Knot City, with a possible desire to major in history. Episode 12, Bridges. At Port Knot City, Sam is given his final delivery, which is a shipment of crypto bytes to capital Knot City that Fragile needs in order to heal. You see, Fragile has worked herself to near death by teleporting everyone, and she doesn't have the strength to get the only person missing, Sam. Typical. Cue the long journey back across the entire country, which I personally find quite evocative. It was nice to see familiar landscapes as I pondered over how far Sam had come since that first delivery. Just outside capital Knot City is easily the laziest boss fight in the game against a BT whale. Sam gets through it, or should I say I got through it, and delivers the worms to Fragile, saving her life in the process. While Fragile recovers, the entire cast is assembled for the first time in the game. Hartman announces that Amelie is the extinction entity he theorized, but can only be confronted on the beach as she is not part of the world of the living. Fragile, who, much like Sam, barely gets a chance to fucking relax, uses what little energy she has to transport Sam to Amelie's beach, and hopefully end the possibility of another Death Stranding. Episode 13, Sam Strand. Whew, are you still with me? Okay, we're almost there. We're almost there, I promise. Arriving on Amelie's beach, Sam confronts Amelie about all of the lies and manipulations that she has put him through for years. Amelie confesses that she is indeed the extinction entity, but then pleads for Sam to stay on the beach with her forever. Amelie claims that no matter what happens or what they do, the final extinction is inevitable. Sam is told that he knows what to do, which ended in me shooting Amelie multiple times. It actually turns out Sam needs to embrace Amelie, getting over his own fear of contact in the process. Amelie decides to hold off on destroying the world because Sam showed her that she isn't alone. But in another case of an odd structure getting in the way of the storytelling, you're treated to a jarringly slow exposition dump on the beach, in which you've to intermittently stand up and run around while you wait on more information and while you watch the credits. I believe rolling the credits was a hindrance at that moment, as you were finally receiving the fruits of your narrative labour after hours and hours of investment. They simply got in the way of the story being told. Of course, you could make the argument that Kojima wanted you to feel the slog of having to exist alone on a beach forever like Amelie, but the execution was poor. Again, just my opinion, but I feel like the credits were better suited to a later point in the game, which I'll get to in a bit. During the exposition dump, Amelie reveals to Sam what had happened to her. Bridget was getting surgery for cervical cancer, but a near-death experience caused her soul to split into two separate beings. One was Bridget, who died at the start of the story and first tasked Sam with reconnecting America, and Amelie, who's been trapped on the beach for eternity. But after connecting with Sam, she had her connection to the world of the living. This is just my take, but Amelie's Quipu, my pronunciation in this video has been woeful. Amelie's necklace signifies her only connection to the world. and it's the key to closing the world's connection to her beach, thereby ending the Death Stranding. But by giving it to Sam, she is essentially severing her ties with the world and saving it, but she is also dooming herself to an eternal existence alone on the beach. It's pretty heavy stuff. Sam is then trapped on the beach for so long he contemplates suicide, in what is clearly an attempt to show the cruel existence Amelie has to endure. Deadman comes to the rescue with the aid of BB, pulling Sam back. Cue the end of the Death Stranding and Die Hartman's ascension to becoming the new president of the now United Cities of America. Sam, however, seems to yearn to be alone. Episode 14, Lou. Okay, almost done guys, almost done. In the game's final chapter, Sam bids farewell to everyone he met during his expedition. In the best monologue in the game, the new president breaks down and explains his history with Unger, as well as how he came to be known as Die Hardman.
And why shouldn't he? Why didn't he?
Sam's also informed that Lou has died, on account of BB's not living longer than a year. Before Sam sets out again, Deadman gives the transparent hint that while Lou must be brought to the incinerator, Sam can try opening the pod to see what happens. BB's outstanding theme accompanies you as you set out on your last delivery. I'd be lying if I said the last delivery didn't touch me. I was honestly upset at the thought of putting Lou to rest. He was my little companion throughout the entire game. This is the point that I would have rolled the credits in the style of the credits back on the beach. I feel like the pacing would have been far more complimentary for the slow, somber trek to the incinerator, not for the heavy-handed story revelations being dished out at Amelie's beach. Look, it's all a matter of personal preference, but that's how I would have handled it. Before setting Lou on the incinerator, Sam reconnects with him one last time. Cliff Unger is back, and this time we see the whole picture and not just BB's perspective on the events that transpired in the mysterious lab. The ultimate revelation comes when Sam finds out that the BB Cliff was talking to the whole time was not Lou, but it was himself. He was witnessing his own memories. Bridges shot and killed Cliff and the BB, but was so overcome with guilt she saved baby Sam from the beach. However, her actions set in motion the Death Stranding that almost destroyed the world. Sam shares a tender moment with his father, a man who sacrificed his own life trying to save Sam. Cliff embraces his long-lost son before letting the beaches of war go. We cut back to Sam faking out putting Lou into the incinerator and breaking open the pod. Sam morbidly tries and fails to bring Lou back to life, but just when all hope seems lost, Lou starts to cry and the two make their way outside, where the sun is shining and the timefall apparently gone. The very last shot tells us that Lou is actually a girl, and now called Louise, which was the name Sam's late wife was planning to give her daughter before she died. Sam is now the father he thought he'd never be. Finn. Okay, Jesus, I need to lie down after that. Again, I know I left out a lot of nuances and small details, but that is the best summary I can muster in regard to Death Stranding. The story is ridiculous, it's meandering, it's convoluted, it's insane, but it's also emotional, it's soulful, it's earnest, and most of all, it's unabashedly Kojima. Him and his team were given carte blanche to tell the story they wanted to tell, and it's pretty evident that they did just that. As I said earlier, the elements I dislike most are the moments that only Kojima would include in one of his games, but the thing is, I also love the game because it's packed with things that only Kojima would include in one of his games. It's a conundrum. The voice acting, motion capture performances and direction are all stellar, and the cast did a great job with their roles. I do wish Sam interacted with people a bit more during the course of the story, as most of your interactions come in the form of holograms. The holograms do add to the feeling of being alone in the world, but it makes the narrative feel slightly disconnected from the world itself. I also would have loved to have been able to enter a select few buildings to get an idea of how living in Central Knot City or elsewhere would be like for the people living in this world. The only base you can enter is Higgs's secret pizza base, and even that one single base added so much to the world for me. I'm sure the development team could have added 2 or 3 unique interiors to break the cycle of the identical room Sam always finds himself in. Ultimately, the narrative was bold, wholly unique and inventive, and I'm thankful to have witnessed an untethered Kojima story. There are a lot of similarities to Metal Gear's story. The stoic protagonist that seems to talk mainly in the form of questions, the characters with names that mirror their motivations, and the rambling expositions. But much like Metal Gear, Death Stranding has a palpable soul at its heart that somehow manages to grind all of the overblowing nonsense threatening to engulf it. The writing team of Hideo Kojima, Kenji Yano, and Shoyo Murata, for better or worse, should be commended for their work, and possibly slapped for the Princess Beach scene. Again, it's a conundrum. What Hideo Kojima's next game after Death Stranding will be is just about as vague as what his first game post-Konami would be. However, there's no doubt what his next step will be, and that will be to continue creating. He's a man driven with a compulsion to create, and his ambition is something I admire and I find terribly infectious. He can be proud of what him and his team achieved in the 4 years it took to create Death Stranding. Personally speaking, it was one of the most memorable games of the last decade, and it was almost a spiritually refreshing experience. A game centered on connecting. A game more concerned with the introspective than endless parades of extravagant action pieces. Moreover, I feel like Death Stranding has solidified Kojima's legacy. It's proof that he is capable of creating new, interesting worlds outside of the Metal Gear Solid universe. That isn't to say Death Stranding will go on to become a universe that spawns many sequels. This was a perfect example of a one and done. Any sequel would struggle to even find a reason for existing, never mind matching or surpassing what Death Stranding managed to achieve. Looking towards the future, I think Death Stranding's biggest contribution to the industry will be its innovative Strand gameplay. I can see the system being developed and implemented into many games down the line. While Death Stranding's features are still rather basic in terms of this online Strand gameplay, it will forever be known as the forebearer of such mechanics. Death Stranding stood alone against the tide of convention and expectation on what a video game is and how it should be constructed. And it should be appreciated for what it is, and not what it should have been. Thanks for watching.